to the cloud. Okay, so this is TX21 Indivisible. We're having our usual Wednesday virtual Chip Roy meeting without Chip Roy and without Chip Roy's staff because they refuse to meet with us now. So we will record this and we will circulate the video of this recording for everybody to peruse. Okay, so we usually read letters and we'll start off now by, I think Shirley is gonna go first. So Shirley.
Okay. To Chip Roy, I am not a Johnny-come-lately Federalist. I'm a concerned American citizen. The Republicans, including you, are using peaceful protesters as an excuse to send out-of-control DHS agents to terrorize American citizens in Portland with Nazi-like SS tactics. You and the Republican leadership are the ones escalating the violence and lawlessness. You, Barr, and Trump are not standing up for America. You're standing up for dictatorship, destruction of the Constitution, and perverting democracy. What's happened to you, to Republicans, to cause you to draw out and embrace the worst traits in humans? And here's another question I'd like answered by you. Can you send a strongly worded letter of questions to the expired DHS Director Wolf to find out why federal agents are cosplay dressing as active duty military while abducting citizens in America? Be very interested in knowing that. Anyway, November 3rd can't come soon enough, Chip. Hope to not see you again. Shirley Ma'am.
Thank you, Shirley. Good.
You're welcome. So I guess I'll be watching the rest of this on Facebook later.
I like that letter.
Okay, thank you. We're off to the beach.
Oh man, I'm jealous. Enjoy it for me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, Shirley. It was a wonderful letter.
Yep. Do you want to go next, Steve? I know you've got at least two.
Yeah, I got three, but I think I'll just do two. But all of them are pretty short. Representative Roy, in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, you've really been rising to the defense of statues, monuments, and heritage. Yes, I haven't heard you specify Confederate memorials and heritage, but when you use words like quote unquote cancel culture that would supposedly quote unquote destroy our country as we know it, it seems pretty obvious that you're dog whistling to your base. The revisionist story goes something like this. We need to honor those who sought to perpetuate slavery by going to war against the United States in order to save ourselves from repeating their mistakes. By that logic, or should I say illogic, why don't we have statues honoring Benedict Arnold as a way to teach future generations not to be traitors to America? Heck, we could have one on the grounds of every public square and county courthouse in the country. Wouldn't that be grand? Get over it, Representative Roy. The Civil War ended 155 years ago. As I've mentioned before, I have Confederate connections on both sides of my family, but I've moved on. My first and only allegiance is to the United States of America, not to a force that sought to, we channel your words, destroy our country as we knew it. For true patriotism, Stephen Shackelford.
Right, good, Steve.
Was there any garbling on that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Hi, Mike.
Hey, how are you all?
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us.
Me too. I'm barely conscious. You'll have to excuse me. This is before my normal get up time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Okay.
Or Mike can go.
Please do.
Mine is really short. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Dear Chip Roy, on Monday afternoon, under the rubric of #Unleash America, which seems to be a variant of your pleas to #Stand Up for America and #Let America Open, you cited your #1 way to, quote, unleash. Give Americans truth/data about the virus and we'll beat it. That was the quote. That was the #1 way. What truth and data are you referring to? Because just yesterday you berated your senior colleague, Representative Liz Cheney, for her support of Dr. Fauci, this country's leading authority on infectious disease. And you have also belligerently opposed expert opinions on how to reopen schools and railed against supporters of those opinions, calling them, quote, white woke people in a 16 July tweet. Your 17th of July contribution to the ad due to the pandemic at the end of a famous movie line, Twitter parlor game, is similarly jingoistic. Here's his contribution. Well, you can, which is from Animal House, by the way. Well, you can do whatever you want to us, but we're not going to sit here and listen to you badmouth the United States of America due to the pandemic. The Trump administration has not distinguished this country with its response. So I would like to know exactly what aspects of this country's national response to the pandemic you believe to be undeserving of whatever criticism you are alluding to. Country over party, Congressman, country over party. I look forward to your response to these two questions. Your constituent, Catherine Wall.
Excellent.
Sure.
Very good.
Yeah, good questions.
Good questions.
That
wanna
will
go?
go unanswered, no doubt, but
No, we won't answer you.
So do you have a letter, Mike?
No, I'm afraid I've been struggling with my motivational levels.
Okay.
I have
Kevin.
to admit the pace of change and the brutal obfuscation that we're seeing out of this administration and its leader has left me speechless. I'm afraid. I wake up in the morning listening to NPR, and yet another awful thing has come out of this administration, or the pace of the demonstrations and the spread of militarism have left me kind of speechless, I have to admit. I worry that there's not going to be a whole lot left to say by the time we get to an election. And then the wind down of the election is something I really fear. There's going to be blood in the streets, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Wow, that was well said by
You're
Jose.
beautiful. I'm
Well,
sorry.
you
that-
know,
I wish I
well
didn't agree.
done. Yeah.
I really don't know what to say, and Chip Roy is a symptom, and I am convinced that he's not going to listen to a damn thing that I have to say. So there.
Oh, well, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
I have the same worries, Mike. You're not the only one.
well, I mean, we all do, and
Mhm.
the normal apparatus of voting in government is being undermined daily. And I hear this morning that they're going to, or rather Trump has announced that he doesn't want to account a certain portion of the population
Mhm.
towards the census. And
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
skewing the census numbers, if only by threat, because people are hiding out and afraid to come forward and be counted, that I don't believe this is going to be a fair election one way or
No,
another.
it's not.
It's not.
That's
Yeah.
why we have to win it by a huge margin, and I'm really worried about that.
Well, you know, massive turnout. We can manage a massive turnout.
Well, except that people are afraid to get the virus and they're being told they can't vote by mail, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you voted, Mary? Did you vote?
I did. I voted absentee. I mean, we're old enough to where we can.
Yeah, I did it by mail.
I didn't want to, but I did.
Yeah. I always thought that it was a exercise of citizenship to go stand in line and talk to my neighbors and talk to the people in the same, precinct or the same voting area. And
Well, yeah, but unlike other countries, we have not gotten the coronavirus under control, so we can't. go in
Really?
person.
So does
Yeah.
anybody here actually have friends that have contracted this disease?
No, but I've had sort of a friend who died of it.
I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
I just had,
Actually, it's the father-in-law of a friend. Yeah.
I have a
close
longtime
enough.
friend, a guy that used to be my teaching assistant,
Mm.
25, 28 years ago, teaches in San Antonio at the School of Architecture. And he let me know that he and his wife and his youngest daughter have it.
Oh no.
And
Oh
they're
my God.
they kind of live
Ooh.
in my old neighborhood in where I grew up in San
Ooh.
Antonio.
That's
And
awful.
he said that they're 12 days into it now.
Mm.
And his body aches are starting to subside, but nobody
Oh.
has any energy, and they're depending on neighbors and relatives to bring them food, and they're stretched out. Poor Steve has got a bad back, and being flat on his back
That's
for
not good for it.
2 weeks has ruined him. He's
Yeah.
going to have to
Oh,
come
yeah,
out
it's
with
terrible.
physical therapy, and he's not. His motivation level is going down rather than up.
Well,
It's
and
very,
what do you
very
do if
sad.
you don't have somebody who can bring you food
You
and stuff? I
struggle,
mean,
or
Really?
yeah. And I don't know if you all saw the article in the New York Times the other day about the Valley. I mean, the Valley, what I read in that article, it sounds like what we were reading out of New York a few months ago.
yeah, it does.
And, Chip, and I need to write a letter about this because Chip posted something about, about this topic, about how it's really bad in the Valley, but made it sound like it was because of, the border isn't secure
The drug
and
cartel.
undocumented, the drug. Yeah, I mean, he didn't actually mention it, but it's all like understood. But
It is.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, it's
But
a lot of dog whistles. Funnily
Oh,
enough, I
yeah.
did write a letter about it.
Yeah. Well, just two more things. One is that my niece apparently has the virus. I think she's like in her early 20s, and she lives in Atlanta, which is kind of a hotbed.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
And then Mike, you said you're speechless and you don't have anything to say, but clearly you did have something to
did.
say, and you said it very
Well, it's
very eloquently.
the
Thank you.
cry of something wounded in the brush,
Well,
Yes.
at least I mean,
Very eloquent, though.
when did you hear any cry of someone, of all of the, wounds and suffering and everything from any of these so-called leaders that we have? Nothing
Nothing.
at all.
Yeah.
So I'll shut
No,
up.
the border crisis is just, I have a letter about that.
Well, Mary, do you have a letter?
I do.
Okay.
And it's funnily enough, I wrote about that same thing that really makes me mad, and even from assuming that part of what he says is true. Anyway, non-representative Roy. We are all as horrified as you are about the recent uptake in coronavirus cases at the southern border of Texas, which has overrun local hospitals and brought the already inadequate healthcare system to its knees. But as usual, and to no one's surprise, you blame the victims instead of the cruel policy decisions that have led to this public health crisis in the first place. For over a century, our unequal so-called partnership with Mexico has led to endemic poverty, unsafe working conditions, crime, hunger, and environmental degradation in Mexico and Mesoamerica. Throughout the last few decades, we have blamed migrants crossing our Mexican border for work for all manner of real and imagined ills, and we have ratcheted up our punishment of them over the years in an attempt to hide the real causes of inequality in our own country. Yet over the same time period, we have remained almost completely dependent on these undocumented workers for our food supply and other essential services, as their undocumented status makes them a cheap, imminently exploitable source of labor. When migrant workers are here, They must work in crowded, unsafe conditions, live in crowded, unsafe conditions, and avoid any contact with the legal, law enforcement, or even the healthcare system so they can stay here. Yet, because of the deplorable conditions in Mexico and Mesoamerica, hordes of people are still willing and eager to undertake the risky journey to work under these horrible conditions. In other words, people are desperate. So we should not really be surprised that a pandemic has brought the suffering of these and other reviled but necessary workers into our own communities, if that is indeed what happened, especially into those communities whose conditions most closely mirror those of the migrants themselves already, that is poverty-stricken border towns. Our farming and meat processing practices have created a perfect breeding ground for a deadly virus eager to kill us all. It has a perfect opportunity to travel back and forth across our border. You say that you believe in personal responsibility. If so, then I am sure that you agree that taking personal responsibility entails treating our neighbors and our workforce fairly. I was brought up Catholic, and I was taught that those who had more were also obligated to give more, that the rich were responsible for the well-being of the poor. When did Jesus tell us to blame the poor for their poverty? You must have a different translation of the Gospels than the ones I've read. Sincerely, Mary Ward.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Some very good points. Jennifer, do you have something?
Not this morning. I'm still working on a few things, dealing with Save Our Stages and trying to put together, because Chip is claiming that he is in full support of the aims of Save Our Stages. However, he's parsing out right now what support for venues and musicians will look like, saying that his own PPE bill, which really didn't address venues at all, and then is pledging at least lukewarm support for the Restart Act right now. But of course, that's still in committee. So I'll have some stuff next week, definitely.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, you have another letter?
I haven't read one yet.
Oh, that's right. Well, you want to go ahead and go next then?
Just got one letter, and it's not a very long one. I was a little stumped this week. Anyway, Representative Roy, I was totally dumbfounded by your unhinged 7-piece tweet last week. Exactly who were you referring to with your comment, hey, white woke people of whatever political persuasion? How do you feel about the fact that it appears 75% or more of the people in ICUs for COVID in Austin are Hispanic? And your comment, you don't give two craps about the workers in HEB. Your tweet then goes on to mock those who advocate wearing masks and are concerned about the safety for returning to school. My first thoughts were maybe Wade Miller, your ex-chief of staff, was back from his PTSD medical leave and was back in charge of your Twitter account. Is that true? Or was this deranged tweet actually from you? My next reaction was that, well, since Wendy is totally outpacing you on campaign contributions, and the recently released Cook political report showed your district was now listed as a toss-up rather than likely Republican, it was all getting too much for you to handle, and you were having some sort of meltdown. Anyway, returning to your tweet, as I understand the term woke, it means alert to justice, especially racism, and came to widespread use as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement. Staying woke is a term to be proud of. And as a Democrat, I'm happy to own that term. I think Democrats have been very much aware that the Hispanic population is being disproportionately hit by the coronavirus, even if you have only just discovered it. And we recognized how indebted we are to their service, working as hospital nurses, doctors, firefighters, police officers, working in grocery stores, retail outlets, preparing our food, etc. However, your history and position on immigration and the Hispanic population in Texas seem very unwoke, in fact. In fact, the term woke seems to be totally incompatible with Republican values, which are totally blind to racial injustice and deny there is any systemic racism at all in America. I'm sorry, Mr. Roy, but I expect something better from my congressman. I expect you to listen to your constituents and not attack them in unhinged tweets. Thankfully, we, the Democratic wokes, can remedy that by voting you out of office in November, and we will. So pack your bags, Mr. Roy. Goodbye, Mr. Chip. Brian Clark, Austin, Texas.
Very, very good.
You don't sound stumped to me. That was great. And that really was a demented tweet.
It was. That was the weirdest thing.
You know, has he even considered meeting? And because it seemed to be about the teachers and reopening the schools and such. And has he even like considered meeting with any people and actually listening to what their concerns are about going back to the classroom? No, I mean, obviously
not to my knowledge.
I just don't think I don't see him as even capable of listening, you know. Anyways.
Well, that's been the case from the very beginning. You know, early on, he said he would listen, but that he wouldn't act on any of the ideas from progressives, that he was elected by the conservatives, and basically he was just going to work exclusively for them.
Right.
Well, he certainly doesn't really want to listen to us anymore since he banned us from.
Well, that's true. Yeah, he's banned us, so he doesn't even want to listen anymore.
Okay. Oops.
Oh,
you're muted, Mike.
You're
Sorry.
muted, Mike. Mike. Does it? Can he hear us?
Yeah, I think so. Still.
you're muted. You need to unmute. There you go.
No, it's still not.
No, it's still muted. Okay. I'll go ahead and read my second letter then, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's short as well. Representative Roy, isn't it amazing and quite frankly sad how a perfectly good word like freedom can be twisted into something unrecognizable and grotesque? For you Republicans and Libertarians, it means freedom for big corporations and billionaires to oppress common, everyday, hardworking Americans. For progressives, it means freedom to overthrow that oppression. For civil rights pioneer John Lewis, it meant being a freedom rider to help rid our nation of Jim Crow and its insidious chokehold on both civil and voting rights, which to this day, you Republicans are fighting a rearguard action against. Today, the fight for racial justice began in the 1950s and 60s, lives on in the form of Black Lives Matter, a peaceful movement that Representative Lewis endorsed, but that you falsely denigrate as being violent and Marxist. For true freedom, Stephen Shackelford.
Yay.
Okay, you're unmuted now, so.
I have video feed. I have no idea why.
Oh, you were saying something earlier. Do you recall what you were saying? We weren't able to hear you.
Yes, I was saying, you can't hear me.
Oh, okay.
And I lost my video feed.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Sorry
right.
about that.